Another way of editing MIDI is with the step editor. It is a graphical editor that allows us to create, delete and edit MIDI information. If you're using an older version than 10.5, then you can still find it when you open up the editors. It will be right here. But after 10.5, the step editor window has been replaced with the step sequencer, which is something completely different. More on that at another video. The way you open the step editor after 10.5 is by first selecting the region that you want to work on, and then going up to Window, and then open Step Editor. Then this window comes up, which is in the automatic mode. That mode displays the notes that you have played. So that is the mode you want to use for anything melodic. But for percussive material, like the one I have selected, we can select the GM drum kit, and it will show us a lane that has all the assigned instruments to that specific drum set. Now most of the controls here should be familiar, as they're exactly the same with the ones that we looked at the piano roll videos. It's just the representation of MIDI information that is a bit different. Now each line here is called a lane, and when you select a lane it has its own inspector window. So if I choose a different one, so right now it's on kick 1, if I choose SD1 snare 1, the name will change to that. All of the controls are lane specific, so if I make a change at the inspector lane, it will only be applied to that specific lane. And each lane is also assigned to a pitch. So when I played this drum pattern, for example, for the kick I used C1. And we can see that information, and of course you can change everything. Now each beam, let's actually zoom in a bit. Now each beam, which is actually called a step, represents a MIDI event, and its height represents the value of that event, which as you will see can be set to anything MIDI related. In our case, as it is right now, the height represents velocity. So I can immediately tell that the first note is slightly louder than the second one. Now let's bring everything closer together so that we can actually see everything. I'm going to zoom out a bit. As you can see, there are events that are quite far down, and I want everything to be closer together when I work on it. So I can simply grab a lane and then move it. So let's grab the toms, let's grab the ride, and that tom as well. We don't need the side stick, we don't need the clap, and let's put the crash up here as well, and let's zoom in. Let's Command U. That is fine. Up to here. Now the first thing I want to show you is how to select events, because if you are going to use the step editor, you will find it very annoying at first. So let's say that you select a note or make selections from different lanes. If I change the velocity on one, it will change it on all of the selected notes. Now if I click at another lane to deselect them, nothing will happen. If I click at one of the lanes that has a note selected, then it will only deselect the note from that lane. So for example, the right, and it deselects that. So what you need to do is to use the Shift key whenever you want to select or deselect anything. So let's say I have a bunch of notes selected, and I want to deselect everything. I hold down Shift and then I click anywhere that doesn't have a step, and it deselects everything except for the lane that you clicked. So if I go up here, it will deselect everything. I can also hold down Shift and then make a selection like that. And that's pretty much it. So you can also select the entire lane by clicking on it. So I can just click this once and it will make the selection of that one. And if I want to deselect a lane, I will simply click at an empty step of that lane. So let's say that for this one, I don't want the first snare, I will click at an empty step and it will deselect that. Now let's look at the hi-hats, for example. Let's deselect everything. Now if I use Shift, as you know, I can select them. But if I do not use Shift and simply click with the pointer, let me make it bigger, I can actually adjust the volume, the velocity, just like that, and I can create some sort of crescendo. Let's Command Z. Now to add a note, same as with the piano roll, if it is on the pencil tool, which we are right now, I can hold down Command and simply add a note. I can also adjust the velocity when I first create the note. So I do the same, I hold down Command, I put the note in, and then without letting go of the mouse yet, I first adjust the velocity and then I let go. Now let's say that I want to add a small hi-hat flares here. Let's do bar 9. Let's Command Z. So right now the grid is set to 16th notes. So if I hold down Command and put them in, it will be on 16th notes. So let's Command Z. I can change that. So we'll go to the pen to the lane inspector, then go to 30-second notes, and as you can see, more lines have been added here. So if I hold down Command and do the same thing, you will see that it still adds 16th notes. So that has to do with the pen width now. Now as you can see, the notes, for example this one and this one, they have different length, different thickness, if you will. So let's deselect them, and that depends on the pen width settings. So up here, the lower the number, the thinner it will be. So let's actually try it for the kick. Let's do the hi-hat. So pen width 1, you can see they are very, very thin, and pen width 15, they will be really big. You can also select, as you can see, the last one, note length, which will use the original note length, but it will only be available if your status is on note. Where is status? It is on note. So it will only be available if you set it to note. For drums or percussive instruments, that's alright, but for longer notes, the display of MIDI information might be a bit too much. So with that one on 1, I can go back here now, hold down Command, and then add it in, and now you will see that it will add on every line, which is a 30-second note. And I can go ahead and change that. So this does not affect the note, this is simply a visual representation. That's what it is. And now I have 30-second notes. So let's zoom out a bit. Now, what if I want to move a note? You can Command X and then Command C to paste it to wherever the playhead is. So for example, this snare, I can just grab this one. I can Command X and then Command V, and it will add it wherever it was. But this will obviously place the note on the selected lane. To move a note from one lane to another, you have to use the finger tool. So I'm going to change to that finger tool. Now with this tool selected, I can move the note wherever I want, either on the same lane, so I can just grab it, just put here, or I can just grab it and put it on another lane. So I'm going to pull that one up here, or down here, whatever. And I can also move selections. So Shift, I will select these, and then Command, and then grab them and put them on the toms. And let's say that I'm really happy where these notes are and I do not want to move them. I can SMPTE lock them. So with the selected notes, just the selected notes, I can go to Functions, lock SMPTE position, and now whenever I'm trying to move them, they will always go back. But this is a SMPTE position, which means that they won't move in time. If I grab them and move them up or down, they will follow those options. It's Command Z. Now underneath pen width, we have style. If you choose no frames, which is the initial selection, then you will get the beam as it is. If you choose framed values, then you get a frame that would represent the full value, and the beam inside it will represent, let's actually do it on the toms, it'll be much easier to see, or the hi-hats, framed values. So as you can see, you get a frame that represents the full value, and the beam inside it represents your current value. Another tool that can help you manipulate a series of steps is the line tool. So let's change to that. Let's say that I want to create a crescendo right here in the hi-hats. I go to the beginning of the event, let's zoom out a bit. I hold down Command and I simply click and drag to wherever I want. So let's go from all the way up to 127. I let go, and now that is a crescendo. Let's look at some options now. The ones up here, as I have already mentioned, you already know from the piano roll video. The only new one is the lanes option, which you can also access from the inspector. So if you click on it, you can see that you can actually rename, delete, or create new lanes. For example, let's say that I want to create a lane just for the specific notes that I want. I want snare 1, I want the closed hats, and the high tone. So these 3. And then I go back here and create lane for current events. So I click on it and I get a new lane, a new event just with the selected lanes. And then I can go ahead and select this one, for example, and change it to, what was that, the hi-hat, so I know what it is. As you can see, it is similar to automatic mode, with the difference that it only includes my selections and not all of the played notes. Now, what I can also do here is double click on it to convert a lane. So this window pops up when you double click on it, and the changes you make on the window to the window on the right will be applied to the whole lane. So for example, I want this to be 30 seconds, pen width, let's go with 8, even more, style, frames. So I will press convert and it will make all the changes that I want. Next, we also get delay for selected events. So let's deselect everything. Let's go with, what was that? Yeah, that was the ghost notes. So I can delay everything. So I can simply grab the delay and then simply move the notes wherever I want. Now underneath that we get length, which can alter the length of the note, but it won't make much difference with the drum set. Next we have status. So when you first open the step editor, it is always set to note. That means that each beam here will represent a note, and I can change that to wherever I want from the menu. Actually, let's change back to this view. Now, for example, with snare 1, let's go to status and change that to pitch bend, for example. Now, these values, whatever I put here, will represent the pitch bend. So I can just simply hold down, change the pencil tool, and then hold down that, and just create something new. And that will follow the parameters that I've put here. Underneath that, we get MIDI channel, where we can set the MIDI channel for the specific note, again, similar to the piano roll video. And then we get pitch, which will change the pitch and assign it to a different key on your MIDI keyboard. And the very last one, articulation, is instrument specific. So if I had, let's say, some violins loaded up, for example, I could choose a specific articulation to be displayed and then just work on that. Now, last thing I'm going to show you is how to edit MIDI parameters. Similar to status, but we can actually have all of the parameters displayed on the step editor. So let's select something a bit more melodic. So let's go with this one. Let's Command U that. Again, window, open step editor, and then go to automatic. Now, as you can remember, automatic shows us the MIDI events. GM drum kit shows us the instruments for the drums, and now the MIDI controls, as you can guess, will display all the MIDI controls you can use to change the parameters. So let's look at that example. So right now, the only parameters we have set are the velocity. Now let's say that I want to affect panning of the instrument. Simply just go in, Command, and affect the panning like that. But let's look at something more interesting. Let's look at modulation. I'm actually going to open up Alchemy. I'm going to put it here. And let's reopen the step editor. So let's look at both at the same time. There you go. Now, if we look at Alchemy, the mod wheel is set to control 3, which is warped. So if I add some modulation information in the step editor, the mod wheel in Alchemy will have to follow that. So let's actually try that. Let's have a listen. Actually, I should have played it before I've done that. Okay, so let's redo that. And look at the warp. And since it's a synth, you can assign it to something else. So let's do mod effects. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Control 5. Again, anything that you want. And the same principles apply for all the MIDI controls. And that's the step editor function in Logic Pro. Until next time.